Okay, so we're gonna get into, I guess, like not a deep, well, yeah, kind of a deep topic. I'm kind of curious to see where this is gonna go. We're pretty much gonna like talk about. Well, hey, Joe, the man behind the mirror, the man that we can't see but we can hear. Tell us what we're talking about today.
I love how you put the Statue of Liberty on that icon. The voice
I
of
mean,
Joe
I
Buck.
was
That was
like,
funny. That's
I like
funny,
it. I was
actually.
like, this is Joseph Mark right here.
Oh God.
He's not an American, but he is a New Yorker.
So you guys have mentioned the whole like tit for tat thing that Trump and JD Vance and Zelensky had over trying to come up with a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. So we're gonna pretty much talk about that whole scenario and why it happened, what's happening now, and what we think is going to happen in the future.
Okay, so we're gonna be kind of focusing on, yeah, what's going on this Ukraine Russia relationship, and then how we're involved in it, and then specifically, yeah, like this recent, what kind of set the world on fire on last, I think it was last Friday,
It was a week ago.
week
Correct.
ago,
Yeah.
where a part of this interaction was opened to the public to like take reporter questions and whatnot. Uh, as a preface, none of us are experts. We're just fools, but we have
Yeah.
opinions,
I have
and we're not idiots. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. But without further ado, let's go. What do you guys got?
Yeah. So
I saw a notebook come out, so I know Bobby A was doing a deep dive.
Yeah, I got my composition notebook. I got some notes down.
Holy shit!
So I get most of my news. Let's just put this on the table because we tell the truth here.
And one rule. So
Yeah.
like two things I want to say, and this is something that we can do as we go forward. One is like make sure we all understand the word. So if we use a word like oligarch, Joe, you're going to be my guy who's going on the internet and getting a definition, so that we at least all know we're using the word in the same way. We mean the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
like a part-time producer kind of thing. Yeah.
Bingo. And
Yeah.
two, I think it's like none of us are getting and reading. Most of us, maybe Rob is reading like the true transcripts or the actual documents. So we're all citing someone else. So if you got your information from someone, just throw it out, whether it's Joe Rogan or a news presenter or whatever. So that's like the two rules for this talk, and kind of like maybe for all of our talks. But go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. No, it's a good segue because I'm going to tell you flat out, I get most of my political news from Bill Maher from Real Time on HBO and from Tim Dillon. But I still, people are going to think it's like, why is he only like he has a certain agenda? No, you idiots. I write down, that's why I have this notebook, because I write down everything that they discuss, and then I do my own research independently. So then I get the full scope of what's going on. So it's not like I'm just sitting there and like bowing down to everything that Tim Dillon says. I like both of them because they're comedians too, and their shows are entertaining. So that's number one. And so number two, yes, I did read some of the actual documentation because that video you sent, I did watch it. I like those guys, because specifically because they're not part of the mainstream media, and I think that's the first thing I want to jump off with both of you. As someone who doesn't, I don't know the actual like nuts and bolts of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine in terms of like the political stuff and the policies, the geopolitical stuff. But what I can comment on intelligently is the coverage of it. So speaking of that meeting, how do you think the mass media has covered that? Because you can clip anything up and you can spin a narrative anyway. So what do you guys think?
I'll throw it to you, Joe. And
Yeah.
just for those listening, we're referring to an interview, not an interview. So Matt Taibbi, who was formerly worked on the Twitter Files, and Walter Kern, who's a writer and kind of political commentator. They have a Monday show, and that's what I kind of sent both the guys as like a precursor on this topic. I'll link it in the description so you guys can check it out too. But go ahead, Joe.
I feel like the media they definitely slanted it towards Zelensky. I don't know. It's a weird situation. You could tell from the beginning it was a setup for Zelensky to look bad, and he didn't help himself by being confrontational in that situation. But it's definitely slanted by the mainstream media that it makes Zelensky look good, and it kind of deflates the American ideal of being a leader in the world by being confrontational with another leader that you're supposed to be an ally of.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could see that, but some people are also saying I think those two dove into it, and which was very interesting to me. So, Joe, what do you think about this? What if it was the setup was the other way? It was
Yeah.
orchestrated so that the European leaders can get together and they can use like JD and Trump getting out of hand or like behaving out of pocket to try to like galvanize everyone behind Ukraine instead of the other way around.
Europe was already galvanized
Yeah.
behind Ukraine, though. That's the thing. Everyone is. So here's the deal: with the Trump administration, it's really more so getting Europe to pay their fair share, and they're not paying their fair share with NATO and with just arming up their militaries. Europe, they realize this, and they're trying to arm up, especially Germany and especially the UK, especially France. They're trying to spend more on military, but they can't do it overnight. So they're all of them are trying to get the Trump administration to come up with security guarantees for Ukraine, which the United States does not want to do.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna chime in now because I think I watched some of the stuff that maybe you watched, Rob. So yeah, so like that's I think there's that. I think the mainstream media, I hate that term, but anyway, what you saw a
I
lot of
think the
was,
right term would be corporate media.
thank you. Okay, corporate media.
Yeah,
The
that's
corporate
that's better.
media has been like one sided, pretty much like this was an attack. This was a setup where Trump and JD Vance, you know, had essentially a script where they were going to like get him, provoke him into behaving in this way in order to provide an excuse for essentially cutting off funding to Ukraine. So I think that's what I heard a lot of like in the corporate media. Um, and then, but it's come out also when other people who are kind of, because right, that was just like one little snippet, because only some of that conversation was open to the public. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like we have weeks of negotiations that were happening behind the scenes. So what I've also heard, and again, I can't fact check any of this, is that essentially they had already worked out all of the details
Mm-hmm.
regarding like the mineral rights aspect, and he was invited as like, all right, now we're gonna like, because we need to like actually formally sign it. We've done all of the middlemen have already worked out all of the stuff, and now when the cameras are on, we're like relitigating all of this stuff when it was supposed to be like, no, like we've already had these conversations. Let's sign the paper and move to the next step. So like that's what I've heard as kind of a counter to like the corporate media is like, no. They were like in the right to be annoyed because like all of this work had already been done through all of the middleman and through them to already figure out like a compromise, and now we're kind of back to square one, and you're bringing up things because the cameras are on. So that was the one thing. And then two, regarding like the Europe part that you brought up, Joe,
Mm.
what I heard, and I think this is Matt Taibbi brought this up, is like they definitely like, yes, they were already galvanized around him, but I think the point that Rob is making is that they already had like responses almost ready to go, like in the gun, ready to shoot off. Because literally, it's like once that little bit, which is like I think it's a 30 minutes of a longer behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Like they like all of the European leaders were pretty much already recording stuff, and like these people don't talk off the cuff. Like this is already prearranged and and he was literally, I think, within hours on a plane to the UK
Mm-hmm.
ready for a press conference. So like
That's right.
that's what I think that they were commenting on, is like this stuff doesn't just happen, right? It's like you don't just make a TV show. You plan out all of the scenes, you get everything ready to go, and politics has kind of become that. So like that's what they're
It's
saying is that,
always been that way.
yeah, well, yeah, true, and even more so now with social media, with the ease of getting stuff out, is that pretty much like it almost was as if someone said, "Hey, you need to like put the kibosh. You got to slow this down," and they were ready to kind of like, okay, all of these foreign, leaders were ready to go with like what they were going to say, how they were going to respond. It wasn't like spontaneous. It was like, oh, we knew this was going to happen, and we already knew what we were going to say
Yeah,
in response to it.
it was
Go ahead.
scripted by design. Yeah, no, and Chris, the and Joe, the language, some of the language they used in their press releases and posts was identical.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just tells you that there was something going on. I'm not saying it was fully scripted and someone saying, "Hey, you have to say it in this exact way," but they had definitely met before and talked about and designed what the response was going to be before even that meeting took place.
So
That's the problem.
let me throw this out to you guys, because like now also a week has passed. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, like after he went to the UK and they only offered him like $2 billion, I think now, as of like Trump's last speech, which I think was a couple days ago, like Zelensky's already kind of changed and is like, oh, I'm kind of ready to let's negotiate. So I guess my question to you guys is like, and I don't know the answer, I'm just curious, like, why do you think Europe seems to have an incentive or desire to like keep this thing going, like knowing that like they're really not winning? And like the more things I listen to that are especially not coming out of America, like some UK like military historians, they're like they're not winning, and like it's propaganda that like they're holding off the Russians, like and I can't fact check this, but like that's not accurate. Like we're being taught that, but in reality it's like the casualty numbers are so much higher than we can imagine. They have no military people, like they're having to conscript younger and younger and younger, and that pretty much it's like the only reason they have what they have is because Russia just hasn't continued to like push harder. So like I guess with that, whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. What is it? What is the incentive for like Europe to keep wanting this like wanton bloodshed to continue? What is your guys' perspective on that?
Uh, I'll go first, but Joe's probably going to know more about this than me. I would say is it a fear of Russia taking over? But this domino theory, I don't think it's true.
It's,
Eh, Go ahead.
the domino theory is what always gets nations into problems. I never understood this idea that if one domino falls, the other dominoes are gonna fall too. That's what caused the whole issue with
World War One.
East Asia, with World War post World War II, with the Cold War. Yes, also World War One, when Austria Hungary had their issue with I want to say Serbia, and then Germany had to go into the war, and then World War II as well. Alliances, as good as they are in terms of trying to prevent wars, once war is started, and it's an all-out total war situation that is good for no one. As for Europe, I think it's a combination of definitely fear, that domino effect. I think countries like Poland are super afraid of being taken over by Russia because they're close and they have that regional history. But I've said this before in a previous recording. Russia doesn't have the economic capability to go into other nations to do the things that the rest of Europe thinks that they're capable of doing. They simply don't have it. That's why there's a stalemate to begin with. Both Ukraine and Russia have been suffering through mass casualties, and they keep going back and forth between taking over a region and then losing it. It's a true stalemate, and this fear of a state like Russia just makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna throw out things like I'm not. I can't provide sources, just random stuff I've heard. So one
Mhm.
thing I heard is that that it's not really it's like that the stalemate that Ukraine is really able is holding off Russia is I've heard people say that that's not really accurate, that it's really a restraint on their part, that they're not like going in as hard as they can, and maybe there's many reasons as to why they don't want to lose people, but the numbers are like so far in the Russia's side that like right, usually most wars are the numbers are what tell you if they're going to win, right?
Mhm.
Historically it's like the person that has the most people and equal weaponry, like they win
Yeah.
usually. Now if you have the most people but the other side has like advanced weapons, that evens it out. So I've heard that where it's like, really, they're like not going as hard as they could for whatever reason. I'm not saying that they're the good guys or the bad guys. I'm just saying like, that's what I've heard. So like, again, with that, it's like to me as an idiot, it makes me feel like Russia is like kind of constantly painted as like, and I'm saying Russia in general, like again, like America, like we are not our government, though our government gets into fights that we are then have to go be the ones to put our bodies on the line. So like Russia's the same. But it is interesting that like has always gotten painted as the bad guy in a lot of interactions when like historically weren't they like outside of the Soviet Union, like Russia was conquered by I think it might be it's fine. I think it might be your end,
Mhm.
Rob.
Okay.
Um
Good.
tell me if I'm lagging some more. Sorry guys.
Now it sounds better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like the French tried to conquer them, right? The Germans tried to
Mm-hmm.
conquer them. Like they've been on like they've been attacked more than they've been the attacker outside of the Soviet Union. I mean, the Soviet Union definitely, but like historically, I guess I don't know. Like sometimes I wonder, it's like, do we have a false representation of them in history? Like maybe you can answer that, Joe. Like how often were they, not just in the Soviet Union, I'm talking about the whole history
Mm-hmm.
of that part of the world, were they the agitator rather than the one being like agitated? Like, do
So
you understand my question? Because I feel like sometimes I'm like, I know they were the ones that got beat up in a lot of the wars we've had that are world wars in modern times. Yet they're always the boogeyman. And is that just like propaganda too? I'm not sure.
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
Uh, so Ukraine and Russia, their histories have been intertwined for at least from what I've seen the past 200, 300 years. Just the Russian um like czar, the Russian like federation before the Soviet Union was always intertwined with Ukraine, and it partly because of
Mm.
um their there's this place called Sevastopol in Crimea. This Crimea is like the centerpiece of the Russian like empire. It gains them access to the I think it's the Black Sea where they
Yes, that's
can
correct.
get their when they can get their navy pretty much set up from the Black Sea all the way to the rest of Eastern or Western Europe. And there's no other easy access for their navy to get to because Siberia is always frozen, at least for now. So, and anytime they go out to the east, it's just a long trek through Siberia, and they haven't had a good history or even luck trying to beat North Korea or Japan. They've been pretty much beaten up by them when they try to go out east because they don't have access to those waterways. So Ukraine has that specific strategic point, and then up until recently, with how everyone is kind of valuing like gas and oil,
Yeah.
everything has been funneled through Ukraine because of access to the Black Sea. And now they found out that there's massive oil and gas pipelines along Crimea. So it's a it's partly history, partly strategic, partly money, to try to gain influence over that region. But when you look at the areas that Russia invaded, it's not the whole country. It's actually the areas where they have the gas and oil pockets. So it's like the Donbass, which
Mm,
is on the east side, and it's Crimea. If Putin and Russia really cared about taking over a country which they have very common traits with, and a lot of Russians have actually kind of settled into eastern Ukraine and parts of west and not western northern Ukraine, they would probably try to take over more of the country, but they really only taken over Donbass and Crimea, and I think it's mainly because of gas and oil.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. So you think
okay.
that's the underlying
Uh,
motivation for all of this?
Yes,
it's
and
a,
it's
it's
not.
about resources then.
It's definitely about resources, and it's also about kind of restoring their history. If you notice anything about Putin, he's like a. I don't think he's like a czarist, but I don't think he wants to go back to that time frame, but he does want to restore the world power status of Russia, and
Y-
taking
Yeah. So
over that area, it helps with that.
yeah, right. So perception and image of Russia as like a superpower is important to him. I would agree with
Hmm.
that. Yeah. But I also knew so Putin didn't he grew up in like a fairly middle class background from what I was researching. Like he wasn't like Yeltsin that came from like the bottom of I don't mean this in a
Yeah, yeah,
derogatory
yeah.
way,
Yeah.
like super poor direct bottom of the barrel where he was scrapping in for his life even as a child. So Putin had a pretty decent upbringing in terms of comfortability. So yeah, like but I, I guess my question is what do you guys think is Putin's end goal in this? Is it just to like reign supreme and image wise, or is it really about finances and resources?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think he
Okay.
wants to be known as like a world leader. I think he wants to be known as someone who ruled in ruled in his day and had some influence on the world. But if you also look at the people around him, he's and I'm gonna throw around that word that you love,
Hmm.
Chris.
No, that's
Uh,
the word you love because I feel like you
no,
use
no,
it a lot.
I was being sarcastic.
I know. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Um, but yeah, he has a lot of cronies that he surrounds himself with, and he supplies like these like oil and gas like connections with. I forget the name of the dude who owns Chelsea, but he used to
Roman Abramovich.
he used to be like set up with Putin, and
Yeah.
then he broke off from him because he loved that kind of London um like lifestyle. But yeah,
He's banned from the UK now. The
oh
he
shit,
can't enter it. They made him sell Chelsea.
I
I
knew
gotta look.
that.
I gotta yeah. So Chris, if you don't know, there's a Russian oligarch under like who was tight with the Putin regime. Used to own one of the most famous football clubs in the world in London. The UK government forced him once Russia invaded and
Yeah.
they forced him to sell his team, but it was all political. Like why does him owning a sports club in London have to do with fighting? But for the PR for England, they forced him to sell his team to American private equity firms. Don't even get me started on this.
Yeah.
So now
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
a yeah, now Blueco and Clear Lake Capital own Chelsea, two
And,
American consortiums.
and how much you want to bet that he's also has some type of his finger in that pie as well? So he might have sold it to them, and then they gave him a percent of it back. It's all bank accounts.
Yeah, no. But what happened was he sold it to the government, so the UK government owned it,
Oh,
and
okay.
then they picked the Americans. So it's a UK US thing.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So,
He's pissed about it. Roman is not happy if that
well, I
happened.
think when Russia when all this kicked off, and right, we're
Yeah,
kind of like on stage two of it because it didn't kick off, and there was
it's like
a
2022.
2014. So
There was the
It actually
overthrow of
Oh, there was
like a
that one before.
Ukrainian who was like
2014,
pro-Russia,
2015. Yep.
Yeah, correct.
right?
I
There was
was
that
wrong.
revolution, quote unquote,
Yanukovych.
civil war,
Yeah.
maybe led by America. And I mean, it's speculated. I'm just reiterating what I've heard on the internet,
Yeah.
for lack of a better thing.
Hey,
Um,
is that a cigar cutter in your hand?
yeah,
It
sorry.
is.
And yeah, so like this is, but I think when all of this stuff started to kick off, a lot of the oligarchs, their whatever foreign connections they had, like I thought like yachts were getting seized, and like a lot of like I think a lot of the European governments
They were. Yeah.
use this as an opportunity to start to like confiscate and
I think you're exactly
property
right.
and money.
If you asked me, the UK government did not want any Russian owners in like their main sport, which is football.
I believe it.
So
Doesn't look
they
good.
used it. They used the war as a reason to be like, this is the time. If we can't get Roman out now, we're never going to be able to get him out, and they squeezed him out.
So the oligarch thing, I was 'cause I knew we were going to talk about this
Yeah.
because my man Joseph's is here.
Yeah.
So I was sort of like, I was like Googling and I was looking up. So like the term oligarch is obviously, I think you can find like Greek, like the word itself kind of goes back, but really it's like, it comes out of the Soviet Union. That's like where the term started, I think, be used a lot more.
That's hilarious.
And the thing is, it's this though, it's like, you got to think when the Soviet Union collapsed, it became like a feeding frenzy. So all of the oligarchs are essentially, to my understanding, they were already part of like they were like Putin. Putin was a KGB,
Yep.
right? So when that
Yes.
broke, they were already positioned, and then it was like a free for all. So they started to take up resources, and then now they've made their billions. So it wasn't like they were wealthy and then tried to infiltrate the government. It's kind of like think of it as like they're warlords, and essentially, and then Putin has had to like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but Putin is kind of like in this dirty dance with all of them, and he's somehow been the one that's been able to like control them and also manage the government, which is kind of an interesting thing because they're all very powerful. It's not like Putin just helps them. It's kind of like they're all in a scenario. It's like rival mafioso that kind of work together, but if one of them shows a weakness, the other one is going to kill them and take everything they have. And somehow he's been the most ruthless of the bunch, able to like also keep the government in order and then also do this dance with all of these like ex-KGB killers with lots of resources. So it kind of is an interesting thing because like I don't want to say it makes you respect Putin, but like the guy must be very competent because that must be like a medieval court. Like it's like Game of Thrones, like literally where you drink something and it might be poisoned.
Yeah,
Like
that's exactly
you know what I
it
mean?
is.
The inner workings of that world is like I can't even fathom it. To me, it's just like reading an ancient history book. So yeah, I don't know what my point is with that, but anyway, go ahead.
No, I think you're right. I think he's done well. You have to give him credit for rising to the power that he has.
Consider that his world collapsed. Like the Soviet Union collapsed, and like
Yeah, man.
at that time, I think people were like, that was a shocking like it was an empire kind of, and then it just ceased to be.
Yeah.
And then in our lifetime, Russia's still kind of like pulled itself back together and is on track to be like a world power. I mean, it is a world power.
It still is. Yeah.
But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's no. You're exactly right. That's you have to tip your cap to that. But I mean, I do I agree with his behavior and his policies. That
I'm taking morality completely out of it. I don't think any
fair.
leader of any of these countries is a moral person. You have people killed.
That's a fair point too.
Whether you're Jimmy Carter, the most peaceful of the bunch, definitely has innocent blood on his hands, right? Like that's just a fact. But go ahead.
True. No, yeah. So yeah, if you gotta generalize it to that, you're right. I would agree with that. But no one can take away from the fact that it is impressive that Russia has this much of an influence on the globe now, and it's largely to do with him. So you can't do anything, but you gotta respect that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's like it's not a moral thing. It's not like saying I condone.
Right.
like it's like reading a history book, right? It's like Genghis Khan murdered. I'll use the word murdered, potentially whole civilizations. But to the Mongolians, he put them on the map, and that's why his statue is still in Mongolia, even though literally how many innocents died by his hand and also by his will, right? It's like Alexander the Great, like all of these people look to him and as this amazing person. He killed so many people by his will and by his hand. Like these are not inherent. They're not in my mind. It's like morality. It's not good and evil. Like I don't think murder is right. So like all of those people kind of are on the bad side of my my barometer. But yeah, like to your point, I mean, it's kind of crazy if you're with wolves to be the top, be the one wolf that can keep all of the other wolves in check.
You
It's
gotta
impressive.
hand it to him. You gotta hand it to him.
Joe, what are you
Yeah.
thinking? Throw something out.
So I think the thing that we haven't really discussed too is how Ukraine isn't actually a NATO state, and they
Yeah,
were
I saw that.
never going to be a NATO state based off of the agreement that the U.S. and Russia actually struck with Ukraine. So this whole idea about Europe kind of rallying behind Ukraine, also that little bit doesn't hold true as well, at least to me.
Do you, Joe? Can you recall the document? Because I've heard this as well. What it was between which presidents? Because this was like in the what
This is 93,
70s.
94.
Okay, 93, 94.
93,
So is
94.
this Clinton?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Clinton and Yeltsin. But
Mhm.
the whole thing was all about trying to get the nuclear weapons that were in Ukraine out, because Russia didn't want to have their weapons in Ukraine for countries that they didn't control. So they kind of wanted to get those weapons out, and the United States wanted to make sure that those weapons didn't fall into dangerous hands. So they struck this agreement where Ukraine would not become a NATO state because it's too close to Russia, and they didn't want Western Europe to have an approach into Russia that big. Because right now, if you're going to go and invade Russia, which to me makes no fucking sense, the approach would be through like this little narrow pass in from Poland. But if Ukraine was a NATO state, then you have this big approach where you can go through Poland and Ukraine, and Russia is afraid that that could happen. I don't understand. I get it. It happened with Germany during World War II with the Nazis, but that that little scenario showed how it's virtually impossible to invade Russia, and Germany had like the numbers and the technology to do it.
Mhm.
There's no numbers in Europe right now. There's no technology right now to do that. So it's just the fear on both sides doesn't make any sense. But Europe, and particularly the United States, the way they're kind of fear mongering and making it seem like NATO is a part of NATO. I'm sorry, Ukraine is a part of NATO. Where if they attack Ukraine, and it's an attack on all of Europe, doesn't hold true. And that even showed the case in 2014, 2015 with President Obama, where Russia invaded and took over Crimea, and NATO didn't do anything. Europe didn't say a word when that happened. The United States didn't do anything because no one really cared at that point. I think it's really more just the domino theory, which is dumb, but I also
Mhm.
think it's really more politics because Russia has been throwing this like underground like campaign of trying to uh, seed foment of Western governments, and those governments are pissed off that that's been happening. So they're holding in this situation. They're trying to hold Russia accountable by funding Ukraine's military response to try to fight back against Russia.
Okay,
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
I'm following you.
there was a lot there. There's a lot there, Joe. So can I ask you two questions then?
Go for it.
What is it? So you mentioned something about it being, instead of it being more of like combat and warfare, this is more of a political angle. So, but is this to gain political brownie points with your constituents to try to win elections? Like what countries are, like, what leaders are up for elections that they're trying to get on the right side of this?
That's the thing with Europe.
Yeah.
At any point, most European parliaments can be called for election. That that part is kind of iffy. So you don't really know who's going to be up for election. Although a lot of Western Europe, like Germany and the UK, they just had their snap elections. French just had their snap elections. So most of those countries already had their situation, but the Russians have always interfered with those elections by poisoning their social media campaigns to try to make it seem like there's like a right wing kind of like rise in those countries. And I think Europe, they they're afraid of populism, whether it's on the left and right, and they're trying to push back and trying to make sure that Russia doesn't have the capability to actually interfere with their elections. And it's the same
Okay.
thing in the US too.
Okay, and where are you getting that from?
It's from this drop site news and the Intercept with Jeremy's. Well, the Intercept is no longer a thing, but with Scahill and Ryan Grimm, and I know, what's the other guy who
Send
went to
that to me.
Brazil? Okay,
What is that?
once we're done,
Glenn? He went to
Glenn
Brazil.
Greenwald.
Glenn Greenwald. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because it's like sometimes I feel like Russia gets blamed for things as if they're the only ones that, like, America definitely
America
is.
does
Like,
it heavily.
we're like
heavily.
influencing is anything we have the ability to influence. So like I think to part of me, it's like when I hear those kind of accusations, I'm like, they're just playing the game that we're all playing. Like,
And that's why it's not an accusation. I
yeah,
think it's both.
yeah.
The
But it's the way
US,
the way it's characterized as if it's like one sided. Like
it's
Europe is afraid that
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
foreign government is going to influence it, like as if they're breaking the rules, and it's like, but you're all doing that, or you've been relying on America to do that
I was just about to say,
on
because
your behalf.
I don't think Europe, Western Europe, has the financial capability to do that, but definitely the U.S. does.
Yeah, so to me, it's kind of interesting. Like I was thinking about this as you were talking, Joe. Is like I sometimes wonder if Europe wants America to break its own back. It's like Russia, like they look at America and Russia as kind of like two sides of a same coin. Of like, all right, let's let them just kind of waste their money and their resources on this battle, and then it kind of like puts them a little bit on evener footing with us as well, because it's like they don't lose anything because they're not investing anything except for like speaking. Like they're not. It's not like they're sending troops there. Like you said, they're not sending any. Like they don't have the ability to send any real resources. I think when Zelensky went to England, went to the UK promised him like $2 billion. Like that's nothing.
Yeah,
That's
that's nothing.
it's a nominal. That's nothing. It's like considering that how much of that will probably end up where it needs to go. Like if we do some dirty math, which I think that's how the world works, it's like maybe of $1 billion, 20% of it ends up where it needs to go, and the rest is ending up people's pockets. It's nothing, right? It's absolutely nothing. So it's
But
kind of like,
the
and of
money
the
isn't the
European Union,
biggest problem, though.
say again.
The money isn't the biggest problem.
I mean, it definitely
No, it's a
is.
factor.
It's a
Major factor.
factor, but boots on the ground is the biggest problem. Like both
Well,
sides, they don't have the people.
I don't think. I think Russia has the people. I don't think that's true.
Look at their birth rate, though. They actually don't. They are actually conscripting people as well. Their birth rate has been declining for decades.
Yeah, but I mean, look at how massive what
Compared to
Russia
Ukraine, yes.
but that's what we're comparing to.
You're
Do you
right.
think any European country is going to send their people, are going to allow them to be sent to
They'll get
Ukraine?
ruined. They'll
Not
get
happening.
ruined.
But
Do
see,
you think
that's another.
America is going to send any troops? That will just not happen.
But
So
I
if Ukraine
totally agree.
have less people versus Russia, who has significantly more people. If those two people are fighting, like like I don't buy that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
If you look at the birth rates of all of Europe, and that's also including Russia, they're declining massively.
That's fair, but that's like almost across all of the Western world. So it zeroes out to a degree, and they still have more people. If your birth rate is decreasing, but you have a larger population, it's decreasing, but you still have a larger population compared to like if they're both decreasing at the same rate, the original data set, like the original
That's what I was
population,
gonna
is
say.
still bigger.
Yeah.
You
If
know what I
you ha-
mean? Like you're gonna still be able to outlive them unless they're able to kill, but due to some type of technology, for every one you kill, they kill 100 of you. Well, then it might even out. But I think the numbers are like for every the Russian to Ukrainian, I think it's like vastly different, right? I think it's for like every Russian, they kill like 10 Ukrainians or something like that.
I don't think it's that high.
Okay. I mean,
I'll look into it after this.
and
But
again, it's like the numbers, it's like unless you hear vastly different numbers, but like I've heard some people talking about how like the numbers that are professed to America, and even I think like Trump brought this up when they were talking with Zelensky, saying of like it's much worse. Like it's like the people who are like on the inside, like it's a clear like win lose scenario. Pretty much like you have no. The only thing you can do is like if other governments essentially start to fight fight the battle for you, because it's like if we just let this go for another 10 years, you're going to end up losing. Like, you know what I mean? You're going to
yeah,
end up losing. It's just going to be more devastating. Just as long as like everyone else stays out of it. And let's say they just keep giving you money. It's like, it's not even helping you at this point. It's just allowing you to hang yourself for a longer period of time. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. That's why I'm kind of, I'll
no,
have to check out some of
it-
these,
I
these
think
resources.
it's definitely a lose scenario, and I think it's a lose scenario for both, because they're pouring tons of resources that they don't have, they shouldn't be using, that they're pulling away from their economy to fight a war that no one's going to win.
Well, and also I thought it was interesting when Trump brought up that how much, well, because here's the thing is with the pipeline being like, Europe is still paying Russia for all of their fuel. So it's not like they're even losing their economy. I don't think it's done that badly either because
They
all of
cut
Europe
no,
needs
but that's
fuel and
not.
they've been buying fuel from Russia, right?
They haven't been buying fuel from Russia anymore. Most of Russia's
Mm,
fuel, their purchases have been going to China. They haven't been buying fuel and if you look at Europe, especially Germany, their energy rates have skyrocketed because of it. But they haven't been buying from Russia anymore. They've been buying mostly from the
that's
U.S.
interesting.
Mm, interesting. So what was that? I know Trump made that quip about Europe and Europe buying fuel from Russia. Was that
Not true.
pre this time
That was
period?
just that
Untrue.
was definitely before the war started,
Because
Okay.
I think
and they
even
were heavily buying from Russia.
the Indian. Never mind. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. So then I guess I don't understand the like what the goal is. Like I get Russia. I think their motivations, at least at face value for what is professed to the world, like if I wrote them down as a newbie like myself, I could be like, these kind of make sense. I don't see the year like I get here. This is my question then. Is there a point of diminishing returns where even if you're losing, I think I might have brought this up in another conversation with you guys, like where the right answer for the sake of your future generation is to accept defeat and whatever that brings? Or do you guys think like it's better to like die on your shield and like we're all done. We're all gonna die rather than like bend the knee? Like that's what I've been thinking about like a lot lately. Of like, there's this whole like there's a whole mystique of like, die on your shield. It's better to like live free than to like live under the bondage of someone else. But I kind of wonder, it's like, is that true? Like, is there sometimes where it's better to bend the knee and live because life is better than to be dead? Um, yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think the whole idea of the last episode that we have plays into this. I think it's more patriotism and nationalism. When you deal with those things, then logic gets thrown out the window. And when you have this
Good
idea that
point.
you're a sovereign nation, and that a different sovereign nation can just come in and take over and not suffer any repercussions, people get little antsy about that.
Yeah, you get when you get charged up emotions and feelings involved, the smart decision, the right choice, like you said, I don't think it's always comes out as the result. It could be they'd rather be wrong and 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 appear strong than make the right decision and be humbled. You see what I'm saying?
Well, and I think that's hard to be
Yeah,
like. I mean, I get it. Like, imagine like just take it not at the government level.
yeah,
Take it
just
in
a
your own life. Like,
human
there's a
level. Yeah.
scenario where like someone's going to aggress upon you, and it's like either you let them and live, or you don't and you die.
And
Like,
yeah,
if I apply it to myself, I'm like, yeah, there's certain situations where I would rather fight and get maybe die than allow you to do something to me that I
I
don't want
agree.
you to do.
Yeah, yeah,
But again, it's like I think about like Genghis Khan when he used to go into like these different places to conquer, right? Because conquest, a lot of times he gave them the opportunity to submit or die, and some chose submission and essentially became part of the Mongolian Empire, and others, literally every single person was wiped off the face of the planet. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, that is the reality of the world. I don't know, like what the right answer is, but I like when I look at Ukraine, it's like I haven't watched any of the war footage because I think you can. A lot of these Ukrainian soldiers got like GoPros and even
Mm-hmm.
Russians. You can find stuff on the internet,
there's insane amount of footage. Yeah,
and like I've heard some like bad stuff, like knife fights to the death, like crazy things that you would never think you could just watch from afar. And you got to wonder, it's like at a certain point, it's like this is just not like this is not worth it, guys. Like what do we gain? Like life is always better than death. Like I guess that's my fault. Maybe I'm wrong with that. I don't know.
yeah, but some people, I'm
I don't
not
know.
calling you this, but some people would say you're weak and feeble for
Oh
believing
shit.
that way. I'm saying
No, I think I think you're
yeah,
not wrong.
yeah,
Like there's not. I mean, think about it. There's like I think it was in Vietnam or in some of these in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
like during World War
I
II.
think Vietnam is a great
Yeah, you
that's a
had
good
cases where
investment.
example. Yeah,
people would just like whole village would just go jump off a cliff and die, like men, women, and children, rather than submit.
right, exactly.
And yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know who's
It's a
the
good
right one and the
question.
wrong one in
That's
that.
more we're getting into the existential side of it. That
So
I'm more with you. I
Because
like
to
my
me, if you're alive, there's opportunity. Like
yeah.
there is always a chance. When
As
you're
long as you're
dead,
breathing, you can change everything. Yeah.
right? And then like so that's why sometimes I wonder. I'm like, if Ukraine was, and I'm not in your shoes, so I can't say anything. But I'm just thinking, like, if you were to submit, what does that even look like? Like most of you already speak Russian. Again, Joe. You brought up, is this just purely a
Yeah, Joe.
patriotism,
I,
Joe has a good
nationalism
point.
thing?
Yeah.
I think
Like, what do you change? You eat the same food. You
in this particular with those two particular players, I think it's exactly that. I think with Europe and particularly the United States is something completely different.
Oh yeah, I mean, if it was Russia who was going to conquer America, that yes, this is different because there's very diverse cultures.
No, I
Where
mean
Yeah.
the U.S.'s involvement. Why are they involved in this whole conflict? Because
oh
it's not
okay,
because of NATO. I think it's really more because of grievance and being punitive. I think that's
Yeah.
why they're in it.
oh yeah, I think that
Mm.
like the Cold War never ended. Like I think there's people in government that were around during the Cold War, and the idea that Russia still exists and we didn't like put them in their place completely has rubbed people the wrong way. Like, and they've been trying to do it ever since. Like, do you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah.
I disagree. I
Okay,
don't
go
think
ahead.
that's it.
So then, what do you
I,
mean then? What is the punitive aspect of this then?
it's it's the whole Trump angle. Like Democrats who were in power, they they didn't like that Trump tried to get Zelensky to get dirt on Biden when they were trying to um, when they were having that election. So that's an angle there. That's a reason why the U.S. is, and particularly Democrats, are so involved in the Ukraine like angle, and just the RussiaGate stuff. Trump is
Uh,
not happy with RussiaGate and how that kind of tarnished him. So now he's lashing out at anybody who was involved with that, including Zelensky, because he had that call where he made it seem like he was trying to extort him.
mm.
So
Yes, I
I
don't
think it's
agree
yeah,
with that.
there's definitely grievance and definitely being punitive. People are trying to get their pound of flesh now that things are happening. The agreement is already the agreement is already set in place. It's really more about just coming back to the table and putting away ego aside, because for some reason they were both trying to embarrass each other in for all the world to see, which didn't make any sense. If you're going to come to an agreement, you have to be able to put away grievances and just make sure that you can co- come to an agreement to show that you're willing to end the killing and the war. But both sides do not want to do it because they're too proud.
Both sides, as in Russia
No,
and.
no,
Yeah.
I mean
Ukraine.
Zelensky and
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't agree with that
Period.
at all.
No.
What's
Yeah.
so? What
I don't agree
don't
with
you
that at
agree?
all.
What exactly don't you agree about
I
that?
mean,
Because
let's be honest. Like, Trump has been the only one that's been actually, even before he got elected, that was talking about the end of Ukraine.
so then
Like, even
why?
if you don't like Trump, it's like it's hard to say that. Like, in our government, he's one of the few people who's kind of like, whether it's all for ulterior motives. I'm not going to even read into the psychology, but like,
Mhm.
why do you sit and you have all of these Democrats that are supposed to be like peace loving,
They're not
who
peace
are like,
loving.
well,
They're
I
not
mean,
peace
saying
loving.
that's how you profess
That's how they
yourself, right?
paint
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what they are, but I'm
Yeah.
saying like that is kind of the whole rallying cry of the Democratic equality, the little guy, even though I don't think that's what they are at all.
But see,
But like,
that's my point though. If you're trying to strike a deal, why are you trying to embarrass Zelensky for the world to see? You should apologize. You should be thankful. What leader does that?
yeah, but so two things. One, I think that like leaders do that. I think with
Not in public. They do that in private,
I
not in
think
public.
it depends, right? So I think that depends. I think our idea of like what a leader should be is like kind of like a strange thing. But anyway, maybe. But again, also, how many leaders actually give as much airtime and take questions from reporters? Like Biden didn't, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that's one. Two, it's like the Trump thing. That was a little bit of that's like the tail end of maybe hours of dialogue. So I think as you do listen to other people, and you can maybe say that they're lying or not lying, that really it's kind of like imagine you've had 100 hours of negotiating, you've worked out every detail,
Hmm.
right? Because this is all going to have to be documented by lawyers,
And
and now the cameras are on, and you literally start to say the exact opposite of what you've been talking to us about for the last 100 hours. Like there's that clip of the Ukrainian ambassador that like is just like mortified
Hmm.
at this exchange. So it took her by surprise too, I would assume. So I do think there was a power play there,
yes,
and I don't think it was like, in my opinion, Vance and Trump necessarily doing the power play. I think Zelensky was trying to see if he could. Cameras are on. You want to look good on camera. I can kind of get away with saying things that like you
but
would.
Zelensky didn't ask the questions though. That's the thing I don't understand. Like from the beginning of when they started broadcasting that stuff, they were asking, why weren't you dressed in a suit? These are all like little tiny things that didn't make sense. When you're trying to strike a deal, you don't do those things in public. Those kind of things are done in private.
So in the full conversation, what is the point of which it unravels?
They they were they clearly want to get the minerals, the rare earth minerals from Ukraine, right? The United States wants to recoup some of the money that they
Okay.
poured tons of money into Ukraine to fight the war. they could have said, okay, we have recouped our money. We want to end this war. We want to end the suffering. Let's just have a photo op where we shake hands, we come to this agreement, and we go from there. That did not happen.
Yeah, but I
They
think that's
wanted to.
because that deal was
The,
essentially they were renegotiating
the deal
the
was already
deal.
made. It was
I think that's inaccurate.
they. You just said, or we just said earlier in this
The deal,
recording
I
that
think
they are going back to that same deal.
correct. I think what happened through that conversation was he was started to ask for essentially for security. What is the expression that they were
Security
using?
guarantees.
Security
Yeah.
guarantees.
Yeah,
That's
just boots on the ground.
adding to what you're saying, the document, whatever this document is, that preordains all of the, both sides. So you're beginning to bring up the contract, like you said, that you've already established what you're going to get and what we're going to get. And now you're kind of bringing up these details that would have already been discussed,
Yes,
but now in
A-
front of cameras. So you are essentially reopening the negotiation live on television
it
when it
wasn't a
should have just
Yeah, it
been.
was.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a renegotiation. He is trying to put on camera. He's trying to get Trump to say yes, we agreed to this. He's trying to catch Trump on his word to say we agreed to have troops on the ground in Ukraine. He didn't want to say it. He shouldn't have to say it. But Zelensky was trying to get him to go on the what is the term?
Yeah, go on the record.
Yeah, go on the record to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
boots on the ground that they actually agreed to.
Yeah, but again, would you not say that would have already come up in conversation and already been addressed as
I
they're kind of both sides were drafting? So he already knew the answer, and now you're trying to get a different answer because there's cameras and there's reporters, and like you are in a sense trying to renegotiate. I'm using that word loosely,
okay.
like the terms of the agreement, right? Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Rene-
I mean, again, two people can look at it and I guess interpret it
Mhm.
differently. I mean, I think other
Yeah.
people have also
I don't think
interpreted.
it's to me it's just a marketing ploy. It's not a renegotiation. He's trying to catch Trump
Okay,
on his word.
All right.
That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to show the people of the United States and the people in Europe that he has agreed to put a
but
X
let's say
amount
he
of
said yes. Let's
yeah.
say he said yes. I promise that. So you're saying that would have just been lip service?
On whose end? On
Like, let's
Trump's
say
end?
Zelensky had said, and you're gonna, they've already had these conversation, hundreds of hours of back and forth, and then Trump or whoever the team is like, we're not signing that we're gonna put American forces we're not gonna send you X amount of people, right? We're gonna we're now invested in the country. Those rights are ours, so we'll protect our rights, but like we're not gonna preemptively, like we're not gonna send soldiers there to like guard them, whatever. And then in this later, what should have been a photo op and light questions, Zelensky tries to kind of like get him to maybe vocalize or change his mind and say, yes, we will actually send troops. How is that not like you're trying? Because then what? So is he just going to say yes and then not do it? You're trying to change the deal. Like if you and I had a deal and we hashed it out and I said, Joe, I'm gonna like whatever, I'm gonna pay you this much money to do this thing. And then when let's say we had 1 million viewers and we were gonna talk and you're gonna say,
Yeah.
hey, didn't you promise me that you're gonna pay me 10x what I said I'd pay you?
But
Right? You're
that's the
hoping
thing.
that that's giving you leverage for me to change what we negotiated.
But it's not.
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
you're getting
No,
into
politics.
semantics, but like,
Politicians always renege on agreements. That's the thing.
okay,
Governments always renege on agreements. The agreement wasn't being renegotiated. He was. I'm gonna reaffirm this. It wasn't being renegotiated. He was trying to put on the record that this is what they agreed to, and
so yeah, okay.
For whatever reason didn't want to do that. He said that because we have a financial interest with the earth, with the rare earth minerals, that we're obviously going to have people on the ground to do it. He didn't
Mhm.
want to. He didn't want to come up with a specific boots on the ground number.
Okay, so I mean, I think
Yeah.
we're on the same page, but like it's not in the document. Written on the document is not X soldiers will be sent to Ukraine by this and this date to do XYZ, right? So if it's not in the document, then it's not part of the deal. Now, if you're trying to add something, trying to like, you know what I mean? Like, are you saying that he said that behind the scenes and now he's not willing to say it on camera?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, we're not there,
Yeah,
but
and I
the
mean, is the document? Can we see the document? Because if it's in the document, it's in the document. Like that's
Mhm.
going to be a public. Like
yeah,
And
I don't know if it's
the
out there for the, and
it's
they haven't really signed
it's
the document, so it's not really out there.
it's not released yet. Yeah.
yeah, I
But
mean,
he,
I think
But
Zelensky did.
yeah.
He
uh,
played his like
He,
he did what he should have done. Right, he's trying
yes,
to
he's looking
get
out
an
for his.
angle,
Yeah,
but
yeah. No.
you can't be like surprised that someone else is. It could have gone two ways. He could have said it. Trump's on camera, kind of taken back, and he agrees. That's one option. The option two is that he got what, like, you're going to get someone that kind of responds, like, fights back on it. He got, it's 50-50. He got the one he didn't
Yeah.
expect.
Right.
Right.
So you're saying Zelensky did this for a stunt? I think both of you. I see
I
both
think
of your points.
I think
I
he's,
think
I think
What's
he's
the
like, it's a
both-
power play. Like,
I think
Yeah.
both of them, power play, stunts, all of it. I think both of them did that.
Right. No, I agree. Why was this on camera? To Joe's point earlier, I actually agree with that.
I don't know.
But I do agree more with Chris. I think Zelensky was more. He had more to gain for having this on camera, and he came into it with more of a gotcha mentality, so that it can be broadcast to the world. But it's like, why was? But to Joe's point earlier, why was
Good point.
this not in private?
That's a good
And
point.
why was this whole thing on camera? This
The
is
one-
crazy.
That's
one
not
thing
how
I'd say-
diplomacy is done.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I'd say, though, that I think Trump has done intentionally is that a lot of the things he does, he brings in reporters and takes questions. He's signing documents. He's signing things into.
So transparency, basically.
And I think he's been doing it for those reasons, because Biden was nowhere to be found.
It's true. That's
So
true.
intentionally, he's been like, I'm going to be as quote unquote transparent.
He did that before Biden was president.
Okay, so then then that's good. But it definitely also shows like a very easy comparison. So I think part of that was that.
He was a TV guy. That's what he loves doing.
That's
He
fair.
always wants that kind of limelight.
Because here's the thing, I don't think it could have been a reverse gotcha moment, because what if he had just never, unless they knew him so well that they performed a Jedi mind trick on him, where they're like, we're gonna prick at the fact he didn't wear a suit, and we know that that's gonna get him so riled up that he's then gonna like get all up in arms and give us a reason to like do what we did. So like, when the corporate media was trying to make it out that like this is like Trump and Vance like they set him up, I'm like, well, if he had just placated and been like, you're right, I should say sorry, you're right, I should have worn a suit or whatever, because I don't think that was the first thing that I think that came out later, then it's like they would have had no ammunition. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, with the suit part, yes. But
but like with all the things, like if he
Mhm.
had just not been willing to fight, like if I don't fight with you, you can't fight with me. I'm not giving you any ammunition to like.
But just saying that you should apologize, you should be grateful. No leader is gonna actually go and capitulate to that. It's just not gonna happen, and that's not how diplomacy is done.
I don't think though that part, and maybe I have to go rewatch it. The whole you should be saying apologizing. I think that came after he started to bring up things, and then he started to talk to JD about this
this
and
needs
that.
more context.
I don't think it was like
There's more context.
they started it out by
No,
saying you should say
JD Vance. No, he literally started off by saying that.
yes, but
JD Vance.
JD Vance came after
They
him and them were talking.
No,
Yes.
they were all sitting. No, they were all sitting in the room together. You didn't
Yes,
come
I-
after.
I watched it. They're talking. Then JD comes to, let's say, Trump's defense, And then he does his whole thing about you should be saying sorry. Then Zelensky's like, have you been to Ukraine? That led to that whole part of the thing. And then he's like,
Yeah.
and you'll find out, you'll know, you'll see soon. And then Trump goes into his whole thing like, don't tell us what we're gonna see or what we're gonna know.
That was
So,
crazy.
I
Where
don't
it was
think it
almost a
was
threat. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it was definitely like they threw in on him and then he responded. I feel like he definitely kind of now. I don't think people who are trying to paint him as like getting like riled up, Zelensky. I don't think he ever was like yelled or like got vocal. He definitely was kind of like not
Agitated.
disrespectful, but like was jabbing, but like kind of cautiously jabbing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had his arms like crossed. He
Yeah,
didn't
but
wanna
like so, like
reach
anyone who's
over
trying to say,
and-
"Oh,
yeah.
he was being so insanely disrespectful," I'm like, you're
No,
exaggerating.
Yeah.
Just like anyone who says that like JD Vance and Trump were yelling at him, like these guys
They weren't yelling.
they weren't yelling at him. It was like a civil, like it was a
it was-
fight done
It was
on
a
camera.
heated debate. It
Yeah.
was a heated
And
debate.
not even like even
Not
the debate
even,
is more. So like I think both sides have kind of like made it out like Zelensky was the most disrespectful man in the world. And
Not
I'm like,
true.
no,
Not true.
Not that I got.
Yeah.
And that JD like yelled. I'm like, I didn't look like he yelled at him. It was heated.
But JD Vance's body language was the worst out of the three, though. That's for sure.
Oh, they were angry. Like I think all three were angry. But I don't think like we've all been yelled at or seen someone yelled at. Like that to me was like three guys very angry, but also kind of controlling themselves, and then you're seeing the anger come out.
Because of that, just how it all looked in the optics, it looked like theater to me.
It's like cinematic. That's
on
the word
all
of it.
three sides.
I mean, they are actors, right?
Yes.
To some degree.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I don't know. So wait, I have
Joe, I'm
one
glad
final-
you're here because
I'm
you and
glad
me can.
that yeah.
Go
See,
toe to
I don't.
toe.
I can't speak as well as you guys on the actual like policy part of it. I don't know.
Joe, to his credit, though, I
Yeah.
think consumes like is really neutral. I imagine what you
I'll show
consume
you
crosses
where-
a variety of the spectrum when it comes like.
I'll show you where I got my stuff from later.
Yes. Well, I
Are
appreciate
you a
that. 'Cause
junkie, Joe? Are you undercover political junkie?
See, but that's the thing. I've always been a history junkie. Like that's
Fair.
that's my thing. If
That's
anyone
cool.
really knows me, they know I'm a history junkie, and then part of that is because of what's happening now. So, that's always been my thing.
Okay, so the final, we could probably wind down on this. My final question to both of you is what I have this written. I was going to ask a lot of questions, and both of you answered it during your back and
Nice.
forth. You cleared it. You cleared all my bullet points. Nice, well done. The last question is: what happens if the U.S. says, you know what, we're just going to remove ourselves entirely from this, and you Ukraine and you Europe, you fend for yourself.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah.
So they actually pulled funding already,
Yeah.
like for now. So I envision a deal, actually the deal that they negotiated actually taking place, because Ukraine, they can't keep going like this. Same thing with Russia, they can't keep going. They need to go back to their non-war economies and try to look after their own people. But if, let's say, in the scenario that you're talking about, Rob, where the U.S. pulls away from the whole situation, I think the war will keep happening. Europe is just going to be the one to foot the bill. They're going to pull all of their resources that they've been trying to build up their own national defense, and they're just going to dump it into Ukraine until the next election, the next U.S. election, where if it swings back to the Democratic side, then the pendulum is going to swing back to the U.S. in terms of having, I hate saying this, ownership of that conflict.
Hmm.
That's if things are pulled away now. That's my
horrible.
opinion.
That'd be like another 4 years of war. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think to what Joe's, I think if America like was just, let's just say like the deal is
falls through.
kibosh,
Yeah.
right? And I think Trump would pull.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think he wants to.
I think he wants to. And to your point earlier, if you want to look at it as for an incentive of, let's say, like JD Vance and Trump like ganging up on him, if you believe that to be true, I could see this being an incentive because immediately they just said no more funding, and it gives them perfect excuse to say, you know what, we tried and we're done. Um, I think if they did pull out and the deal wasn't done, I don't think Europe can. I don't think Europe. I think Europe would quit very quickly. That's why I think Europe wants America involved because
Yes,
I think they want this battle fought, but they're not willing to pay the money. So they're
a
kind of
hundred,
like,
100%.
yeah, they're almost using
Yeah.
us as a proxy for themselves, just like we've used other people as a proxy. And they would love us just to keep on fighting this battle. And I think it's a win-win for them. Like, all right, Russia gets just bothered. Ukraine, we don't care, like in the end. And then also America, you're kind of at a disadvantage as well, right? Because you're now focused on this thing, your resources are going to it. So it kind of gives us some time to maybe catch up to you so you no longer have as much of a leverage on us.
Yeah.
But I think if they had to flip the bill, I think you just see them very quickly also trying to pressure the war to come to an end just
Yeah.
because they're unwilling. Like, they're not at 2 billion. Like, UK, like if you look at Europe, how many of them can even cough up 2 billion to just say, here, take it, and like, you're not going to give this back to us, like we're just going to give it to you. So I think that even then the war would end. It might go a little bit longer, but I don't think Europe could afford to pay for another 4 years of warfare. Like, do you think, Joe, that they could, like, let's say they took on the
Not
full.
on the scale of the United States. Is That's for sure. Not on the scale of the United States. But I think they could, whatever weapons that they're coming up with, they would fund because they're not fighting anyone else. They're just gonna throw it to Ukraine.
You think that they would give soldiers?
No, no, not soldiers. Just mainly equipment.
Yeah, so it would just be Ukrainians slowly diminishing their population, but they'd have weapons to still fight with.
Yep.
So even then, it's like if it's a war of attrition, it's even then it becomes a question of like, how many more years of people do you have that can fight? Like another,
Pretty much.
are you going to be getting 16-year-olds? I heard that they're going they're conscripting like 18-year-olds. So
That's
it's
wild.
like how young can you go? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah,
The
I just hope it
whole
ends
premise
soon.
of war is to always get the youngest as possible. They have the most energy. They'll keep doing that. I can see that happening.
Yeah, and
Yes.
even
16
then,
is crazy though.
I wonder though, like how young can you go before even then it becomes like a uh, a PR issue, right? Like you're gonna have armies of 14 child soldiers like in Africa,
When it
like
comes to nationalism and patriotism,
Yeah,
I
you
don't
full
might be right.
I don't
circle,
yeah,
full circle.
I don't think that's gonna get full circle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you brought up that because you're right. Because this, to your point, Joe, you brought up nationalism and patriotism last week. That's why we discussed it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It did blend in perfectly with this because it is a good question of like, all right, what is the worst case scenario if Ukraine was just to say, we're done, we give up, like we're done, arms are up, Russia, do with us what you want,
The white
like,
flag.
yeah, white flag.
Like,
What is the
yeah.
worst case scenario? I mean, I don't think it's going to be like Russia's going to come in and just like kill
Slaughter
everyone.
everyone. Yeah.
Because if that was their intent, they could be dropping. They could probably be doing more now.
But they don't have the capabilities now. They would have to rely on China heavily to do that.
Yeah, that we can have another conversation a different day because I don't know how equal. Like I feel like Russia is actually more advanced than maybe we're giving them in this
Credit for,
scenario.
yes, but you can have all the technology you want. They don't have the numbers that China has, and they don't have the money that China has. China's literally, if China decided we're not going to buy any more Russian oil, Russia's done.
Oh, I mean
Done.
that's fair. I mean, but that is their, that comes down to different allies, right? So yeah, I mean,
Yes.
if they
And right
pull
now
that,
they are, yeah,
but
right
that
now
is their
they're
ally,
allies. Yep.
Yeah.
and if it maintained to be their ally, if it continued to be their ally, then yeah, I just don't see a scenario where they would lose. but I don't also think that they are like using their full strength. If their desire was to like wholesale slaughter, and some would say that it is, and maybe I'm misinformed, like that they could be doing even more damage. And maybe I'm wrong. Like I've heard that also there's certain cities like they've kind of like I don't know. I don't want to misspeak. Maybe I don't know. I don't want someone to think I'm like maybe I'm very wrong. Um,
So you're
anyway,
uh if US completely ceases involvement, you think that emboldens Russia? That's really the main
No,
question I think you're getting at.
no,
Would it?
I
Yeah.
I don't see. This is the thing I hate about this whole story. Like Russia, it's it's always about the money, always about that, and it's also about a historical thing. Ukraine, and Russia, and Georgia, and that's why Russia invaded Georgia in like the 2005 2006, and everyone was they didn't know what was going on because the U.S. and Iraq, but Russia has like a tied relationship between Belarus and Ukraine and Georgia. They want to pull them back into the fold. They want a buffer zone between
yeah,
the West, and they want money. That's all it is.
yeah. No, I
That's
agree.
all it
Yeah,
is.
with what Joe's saying. I think if America pulled out, I don't think it's like Russia would then destroy that whole country. I just think that country would
Yeah.
become a satellite of Russia. It's pretty
Yep.
much just saying you guys are gonna you're on our team. Like you're not gonna be allowed to be in the UN, and like we're gonna probably have economically a tight. You're gonna be our you're we're connected, right? And I think that as naive as I might be, like I think that's the worst case scenario. Like I don't think like I don't think it's like America is keeping them from just wiping out all of the Ukrainians. I think it's one of those things where you have a guy who keeps punching you, and then you got to punch him. You're going to keep punching him back. But if he stops punching you, you're going to stop punching them. Like that's how I look at it. So that's why when I see Europe, it's like trying to get them to keep going. I'm like, you don't care about these people. You're just using them to fight a battle for you. You have no care about the Ukrainian people because
Mm.
4 more years of fighting, what additional percentage of that population is going to be dead? Like that country as it stands will need probably like what 50 years. What do you think, Joe? Like how many years will it need to like repopulate itself?
I think more than that.
Like
I
a
think,
100 years.
and a lot of the, and I think
Yeah.
that's another reason why Europe is kind of worried too.
That's
A lot of the
crazy.
population
Yeah.
have kind of migrated to Poland and to France and to Northern Europe and the UK. So they don't. I don't know if they want more migration from Ukraine. So that's another part of it. And I think deep down inside, I think if this happens and with Brexit, I think they are afraid that the EU and NATO would collapse. I think that's another part of it too.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, this was pretty winding. Joe,
Wait,
thank you.
yeah, before we go, I know I have a theory of where that 2 billion that the UK pledged to Ukraine comes from. I know where it comes from. I'm telling you. I'll talk about it on my show, the late night investigations, the secret truth. But the story is too long. It'll take another 50 minutes. But Chris, before Perea or Ankalaev,
Oh my
313 is
god.
tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go for. I want Pahea to win.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like him. I want him to win. I just like the idea. When it comes to fighting, I do like the Goliath over David. I like the
Yeah.
guy who just never loses. I think it's cool,
Yeah,
like
but
unbeatable.
have you ever seen Ankalaev fight? I haven't. This is going to be the first
You
time I
probably
watch him.
have seen him fight. I've seen him fight. I mean, he's Dagestani.
Hmm.
He's primarily a striker, even though those guys are usually wrestlers. So like that's the big question about tomorrow's fight is like, will he? Because I mean, if you're going to strike with Alex Pay, you're at a disadvantage. Like that's what his
Yeah.
bread and butter has been. That's how he's paid for his family for 20 years, right?
Yeah,
But if you wrestle him, he's at a disadvantage. So some of these guys, I think, out of ego, are like, I'm going to beat him at what he's the best at.
I see that. I see that. Yeah.
But if he takes him down, he could win. So it's kind of interesting to see what happens. I think that's what all the UFC people are kind of like speculating about.
Yeah. I like Perea in this fight too. And then I'm going for Gagey. Even though he might lose, he's the underdog
So he fought that guy
against
before.
Fiziev. Yeah.
and he broke his leg, I believe.
Jesus.
He broke the guy he's fighting. I think he broke his leg, so he won the first time.
So there's a vengeance angle
Yeah.
for Fiziev.
Where do you think he's from?
If
If you just looked at him,
Fiziev, I would say
it's interesting.
He looks Eastern European.
He is like from one of the stands.
He is. I just looked at it.
He is a descendant of a Genghis Khan. Like
Azerbaijan, the Mongolians.
And what's so fascinating is like the people from that part of the world, they could look like anything. They could have dark complexion. They could have red hair, blue eyes.
Yeah, he
green
has red.
eyes,
He has
blonde.
red beard. Yeah,
yeah. It's really interesting.
All right.
Cool.
All right.
Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you, Joe, for being here.
That was a good one.
Joe is the knowledgeable.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Though maybe biased. Just kidding.
Yeah. Not kidding.
Yeah. Tune in to another episode. We'll catch you next week.
Yeah. Peace.
Have a good night. Peace.